Hola, mis amigos y amiga. Bienvenidos a Curtain Call, a program of reviews and previews of the great art and artists on Mali and beyond. I'm Paul James Brown. My trip to Cuba was a wonder. The Cuban people love beauty and represent it in their amazing architecture and ubiquitous art and music. Walk down any street, and as you go from house to house, a different music will be coming out of the houses, and no one complains that the music is too loud. There seems to be no noise regulations in Cuba. The variety of art that I found ranged from highly kitschy commercial stuff for visitors to challenging high art. Art is everywhere, not only exhibited in galleries and museums, but in restaurants, stores, and other public places. In Cienfuegos, we came upon the Grandma Moses of the region, Hugo Rivera Gonzalez, a self-taught master who sees himself as the tortoise he puts in many of his paintings. He tells the story that when he started painting, he worked on cardboard because he couldn't afford canvas. His first juried exhibit was a regional one with many trained artists in attendance. When they saw his work, they laughed and told him to go home. He would never be accepted. When he brought his work before the juror placed all of his work but one on the left and announced he wanted to buy all of them. Leaving empty-handed, the other artist inquired as to what happened, and Senor Gonzalez, not desirous of making them feel bad, told them they had all been purchased. He remembered the tortoise and the hare story and saw in them a metaphor for his life, and ever since then, he has included the tortoise in his work as a representation of himself. His work is at once profound, humorous, and confessional. I found the work of Jesus Rabol in retrospective in a restaurant called Shalom in Cienfuegos. The art curator Claribel Rosales Delgado said about his work more recently, the painter's interest is aroused by an aesthetic discourse consistent with social situations and behaviors that become rugged, such as child violence, gender violence, and other issues that open up a broad perspective to his artistic work. Without a doubt, his success is the result of his constant search, that is, having found the way to simplify the expressive resources to suggest various readings and encourage questions, conjectures, visuals which point to the man, to the human, even when we don't see it in ourselves. Every day in Cienfuegos, where the road has been turned into a pedestrian walkway, there is an outdoor market. Strolling along there were crafts, gifts, leather, clothing, and along the street were galleries. This is Coco, and this is the work I purchased for 50 CUC, about $36.50 in US dollars. As we walked along, we came to a gallery called Art of the Resistance. Outside the gallery was a young man with dreadlocks down to his ankles. He came into the shop and told us he was a graffiti artist who goes by the name of the Tooth Fairy. I asked if I could see his work, and he showed me these maquettes. Here is Atlas carrying the apple symbol instead of the earth. This one depicts our evolution. Here is one that needs no explanation. Here is one that depicts the result of gunfire, and one that looks like a scream, but the letters above inform you of the artist's intent. Next, this one sums up the attitude of the millennials. Then there is this one that suggests what needs to be done. Here is a plea for peace, and these last two are anybody's guess. Finally, we see that the Tooth Fairy has a sardonic wit and an eye for the ladies. In that same gallery was the work of Adrian Alvarez Sanchez. Senor Sanchez works in wire. Here is his interpretation of Bob Marley. The black is wire, giving the work an entirely new dimension. And this portrait of Dali is entirely wire. It's a truly extraordinary work. Here are some interpretations of Edvard Munch you may recognize. Also, there was this pop art of Marilyn Monroe superimposed over the iconic photo of Che Guevara. We left Cienfuegos on my birthday, February 23rd, and returned to Havana. That night, we went to the FAC, Fábrica de Arte Cubano, a former glass factory that has been converted into one of the most fabulous art/party spots on the planet. It sports at least 6 bars, 3 performance areas, and thousands of square feet of exhibition space. It is a catacomb on the ground floor, and there are 3 levels. We decided to start at the top and work our way down. When we got to the top of the steps, we were greeted by Enrique Rottenberg's Last Supper. Senor Rottenberg is like Robert Mapplethorpe meets Diane Arbus. He plans his photos meticulously, casts himself, and his exhibit was entitled An Imagen y Semejanza, an image and a feeling. Rottenberg's work is intense, personal, funny, sarcastic, biting, and emotionally engaging. Much of what is of his best work involved nudity and cannot be shown. But his other work in the exhibit spanned nearly a decade. Here is the interpretation of Don Quixote with the artist as Che Guevara. Do you remember this famous painting from 1793 of the murdered Marat in his tub? Here is Rottenberg's interpretation. He calls it Marat's eggs. Most of the works in the show are archival prints on paper, but in 2016, Rottenberg mixed oil painting with photography. The result was what I think is his best work. This one, called Vase Oil, is particularly striking. I also thought this one from that same period was exceptional. He collaborated with the painter Carlos Quintana to come up with this one entitled Rhino versus the Abstract. His earlier work from 2011 was quite humorous, and he wore a costume. This one, called Buy Tricks, made me laugh out loud. Here is another of him with a leopard costume, one entitled Leopoldo. The artist known as Moti, or Yuniel Perez, is doing something I never saw. At first, when you look at her work, it looks like a rather pedestrian portraiture. But a closer look reveals she is painting on screen. This gives her pieces an eerie three-dimensional quality I have never seen before. Finally, we come to what I feel was the most powerful piece I saw in all the time I was in Cuba. The photographer known as Vi has given us 1448 to 2020 ? A digital pigment print. What you say is so powerful about a live naked woman with her back to the camera? Look closer, and you will see the answer. On her back, as if it were whipped into her skin, is the plan for a slave ship. On the top of each leg is the view of the areas looking down from above where the slaves were kept. One clearly sees how the slavers intended to stow their cargo. It's a haunting image of man's inhumanity to man. The question mark after 2020 is curious. Is the artist intimating the return of slavery? Well, let's hope not. On our final day, we went out to Fusterland, an incredible work of mosaic art by Cuba's renowned artist Jose Fuster, who used his entire barrio of High Manitas on the outskirts of Havana to decorate the walls, squares, and 80 houses in unbelievably beautiful mosaics. I barely scratched the surface of Cuban art. I didn't visit the major museums, so I know there is so much more to see and hope to return next year for more exploration. Well, that's Curtain Call for this week. Next week, I'll have a review of Art Mali 2020. Thanks for watching Curtain Call. I'm Paul James Brown. Hasta luego.